Welcome to episode 1 of series 2 of ConstructionCast. Thank you for joining us this morning. If you are new here, welcome. ConstructionCast is a fortnightly web chat. We've just had a break for the summer. We've been running since the start of the first lockdown, where we bring in some experts and talk about some of the topics that are most relevant to the construction industry. If you're returning, thank you for coming back. It's good to have you. If you have any problems hearing us or seeing us or any of those things, do drop my colleague Natalie a line, natalie@limeslade.com. She's in the chat. You can either drop her in the chat or drop her an email and she'll be on hand to help you with anything. Before we start this week, next week we will be looking at insolvency and payment. So again, there'll be a link in the chat with the link to sign up for next week, and we'll be sharing that afterwards. If you've missed any of our past episodes and you want to catch up, they're all on the Limeslade website, and so are the details for future events, and that's limeslade.com/constructioncast. And if you want to get involved, please do put your questions in the chat as we go along. We'll be putting them to our speakers. And if you've got any ideas for future topics you'd like us to cover, we do have a plan for the rest of the year, but if there's anything people are really dying to hear about, do get in touch and let us know. Either myself, Annie@limeslade.com, or Stuart@limeslade.com. Always happy to hear from you all. So before we get started, I'm just going to introduce this week's speakers. This week we're going to have a look at technical experts. So we are delighted to be joined by Mark Wheeler, who is the head of Dialis and a quantum and technical expert. Mark has 30 years engineering experience within the construction industry. He trained as a mechanical and electrical engineer with a firm of specialist contractors. Mark has acted as an expert witness both in technical and mechanical and electrical matters and quantum disputes. And then we have David Rintoul joining us, who is a partner in the construction team at Dickinson. David has over 30 years industry experience, and he advises and helps clients mitigate and resolve disputes, adjudication, litigation, or in alternative dispute resolution processes. So to kick off today's event, we're going to start with what might seem like a basic question, but we talk a lot here about quantum and delay experts, and we've had episodes on both of those issues. But Mark, they're all often grouped together, but what is the difference between those kind of experts and technical experts, and how does the role differ?
I'm sure that that there are many different definitions, but my own, based on the people that work in our business, is that our technical experts do things like structural engineering, mechanical, electrical, architectural, tunneling, very specific technical disciplines, whereas generally speaking, our quantum and delay people will deal with a whole project. And the whole project obviously encompasses the work that's done under each of those specific technical disciplines. So it's usually very focused on a particular specialism.
So we'll start off the chat. We'll kind of take a look at kind of the work of experts more generally. So quite often experts take different roles. They might be appointed early on before formal disputes arise in perhaps an advisory role, or sometimes you have people that work on preparing claims. Mark, when this happens and then a dispute does develop later on, does this prohibit someone from acting as an expert if they've been involved a bit earlier on? And what safeguards do you put in place at Dialis to prepare for these situations?
I think I'd say that the difference with delay, and there's a difference between delay and quantum and technical. So for example, if you've been involved in drafting a claim, you are putting perhaps the best foot forward, you're doing something that's fair and reasonable and properly assessed, but you're expecting perhaps a period of negotiation, and you're expecting things to come out of that, and it's very much a commercial process. If someone calls you in and says, this building, the air conditioning has never worked, please fix it, you're going to come up with a technical solution that you think is the right solution. I'm not sure that anyone working on that kind of project technically is going to come up with any kind of different solution or any over or understated type of solution to that. So I think with technical experts, there's probably less risk in that. And I think if you treat every matter as though you are independent and you're going to give your independent view, then you can probably, get through that. If you're a quantum or a delay person and you're involved early doors in an advisory capacity, it's probably best just not to go anywhere near the expert role. I think that creates a lot more challenges.
Thanks, Mark. David, when you're working with experts and getting ready for kind of cross-examination, where do you draw the line between preparing them and coaching them, which is not allowed?
Well, as you say, Amy, coaching is strictly prohibited, so that lawyers cannot prepare witnesses on what they should say in response to anticipated questions, or in some circumstances might otherwise try to persuade them to change their minds on the evidence that they will give. On the other hand, witness preparation and familiarisation with the court process is one that's generally encouraged by the courts. It's essential that expert witnesses understand the theory, practice and procedure of giving evidence and what is expected of them, because the courts very much come at this from the viewpoint of not wanting expert witnesses to be disadvantaged by an ignorance of the process and taken by surprise at the way in which the hearing works. And so detailed preparation of expert witnesses for the giving of evidence and cross-examination and how the process and procedure works is something that is very much part of our role, yes.
Mark, when you are working as an expert, how do you ensure impartiality and not coming across as the sort of hired gun?
I think that expression has been around for a long while, and I've come across it in two contexts. The first is I've heard one expert with a polarized view of life describe the other expert who has a different polarized view of life as a hired gun. And it's just it's in some ways being a bit dismissive. It might just be that he has a different view. If his view is entirely aligned with that of his clients and it is unrealistic, then it may be that, you know, that's an appropriate phrase to use. I think generally you sometimes find some experts who are working in a technical environment who are not used to and have not had any training on what the expectations of lawyers and courts are, who don't really understand that they're not there to be as a technical advocate for their party. So I think you've got to make your own independent view and not be overtly influenced. But that doesn't mean that someone else who disagrees is necessarily a hired gun, unless, of course, their view of the world is completely unrealistic and they're not able to support it. And I have had that a couple of times. The way I've handled that, particularly in joint meetings, is just simply to say, well, I know that's ridiculous. You know that's ridiculous. If you want to advance that argument and stand up in court and be tested on it, I'm not going to challenge you further because part of me really wants to see it. And usually there is some kind of adjustment or back down from there. So I'm not sure it's a massive problem in the industry overall. We do, come across some people who are a bit left field sometimes, who don't understand what independence means. Those people generally get found out quite early on.
You talked there about the expectations of the lawyers. David, what do you expect from an expert? What makes a good expert from a lawyer's perspective, and what makes it easier to work with them?
Well, as Mark just touched on, two key words there are obviously independence and impartiality, which are prerequisites for good experts and their evidence. And alongside that, I would also add an objectivity. An expert should never be tempted into descending into advocacy on the part of their appointing party. They shouldn't advocate the case. It's essential that experts remember that their duty fundamentally is owed not to the party paying their fees, but to the court or other tribunal, and that they're obliged to consider all the facts and not omit to consider facts which could detract from his or her otherwise concluded opinion. I think that's essential. From my perspective as a lawyer, what I'm looking for, in addition to all of that, which should be prerequisites that you shouldn't have to question, I'm looking for an honesty, a consistency of approach, a willingness to acknowledge and change an opinion if new facts or evidence or documents come to light that require that. And an ability also to work with other members of the team, because it's likely, certainly on the bigger cases, that an independent technical or quantum or delay expert will need to be working with other experts and other factual witnesses, as well as those appointing them. So I think that's how I would summarise what I'm looking for in a good technical delay expert.
Some good tips there for anyone working in the expert field. So, Mark, I've worked with experts for a long time, and you do come across quite a lot that hark on to the good old days before we had all this tech making things very fancy and complicated. Has the role changed over the years you've been working in this field, and has tech and the large volumes of evidence and data that we now have access to made a difference to your role?
I think it's challenging, and on a large arbitration you can have 300,000 or 400,000 documents, and the reality is no one person can read all of that and assimilate it. And I'm not sure that most tribunals could convincingly say that they will have read every single bit of paper and looked at every single drawing. So finding and homing in on the right information and the key information is important, making sure nothing's been missed. Some of the document management platforms are helpful with that, and their search terms have got better and better over the years. I think things like BIM and 3D modeling creates some challenges sometimes. I've been working this week with some models that have links missing, and it's really difficult to clearly access the right information and make sure that it's the right information. And so you can end up with a BIM expert talking about why the model doesn't work as well, and it creates another layer of difficulty. So I'm very keen on technology that actually helps cut to the chase. But software that keeps the data locked up and isn't readily accessible can cause a lot of problems. And now on a large project, it's not uncommon for us to have BIM and CAD people in the team full-time, working away to make sure that the experts can actually see what they need to look at, and that we haven't missed anything that's been locked up in the model. And then you get corrupted data occur on something, and it just creates a whole new layer of problems. So I'm not convinced that all of these software advances have actually helped the cause. And sometimes being able to do a calculation or demonstrate something just with a sketch with a pencil is often a way of cutting, right to the core of what the actual issue is.
Absolutely. And staying on a tech theme, but we're going to move a little bit more back into the world of technical experts specifically now. David, are there any recent trends you're noticing in the type of experts you need to appoint? So I'm thinking in terms of the kind of modern methods of construction data experts, rather than those kind of traditional experts with the construction backgrounds.
Well, I'd just like to draw upon a point that Mark's made there about increasing prevalence of BIM as it's adopted in more projects. Certainly something that I've seen becoming an increasing trend amongst the use of delay analysts who are working on BIM projects, or who might historically have used Primavera or other outputs. And I'm seeing some delay analyst reports now being presented with reference to BIM 4D modeling, better presenting time and program information, rather than just relying, as has historically been the case, on baseline and updated as built programs, trying to establish where the critical path on the program might lie at any one time, so that these delay experts are using technology effectively to upskill, to enhance their visual communication. And as Mark alluded to, in relying on 4D BIM in better presenting time and program information. I mean, it does have its challenges in proving the model and the data, but nonetheless, as a methodology, it's very effective, so far as I've seen, in describing and making clear the effects of events. Mark, I don't know if there's anything you would like to add to that.
I do agree, and I think that when you've got 30 or 40 lever arch files full of data, and you can show someone a 10-minute video that explains the story, people get it immediately. It can also aid settlement if it's done soon enough, and that simplification of a very complicated story can be massively helpful. I think the only pro quo to that, from my experience when we've done it, is that you do still have to be able to go into the detail and be able to demonstrate that the video that you've just shown someone of all the piling being done out of sequence, for argument's sake, is actually what happened, and that what that what's been created is not a sort of Hollywood trailer for your case. It is actually founded in fact and demonstrated from the model. So I don't think that it saves any money for the clients. I think you've still got to do the hard work. You've still got to do the detail. As a presentation tool, so everybody gets the story, I think it's fantastic.
Completely agree on that. So again, Mark, come back to you again on the types of instructions. Are you seeing changes to the types of instructions and skills that are needed, and how do you go about sourcing those specific skills when things come in that you've maybe not crossed your desk before?
Oh, you mean new things that people ask for?
Yeah.
I think sometimes when we're doing a project, there will be something very, very specialist. Something recently crossed my desk about safety valves and their manufacture. And in that case, I think what we can do is help the client and the lawyers find someone who has that technical knowledge. But they have to understand that that person, who might well have 30 years worth of valve manufacturing knowledge, will never have been an expert, never have given testimony, and will need to be helped in order to understand what the obligations are and what they should or shouldn't be doing. So I think we have to sometimes, with those really fine-tuned specialisms, go out into industry if we need to, and find those kind of people. That said, we do have a wide range of technical people on board, but stuff like that doesn't come up terribly often. And if it's some general evidence about valves, for example, I'm more than happy to do that. If it's something about the technical manufacturing process of them, then we really need to go outside for that.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw a similar sort of question at you, David, and I'd be interested to know what those in the in attendance, if they've got any obscure ones. What is the most obscure expert you've had to work with?
Well, I had to appoint an M&E expert in the context of the operation of a meat abattoir and concerns around the impact of the installed systems on the environment, odor control, moisture extract, looking at issues around whether or not the utility consumption of the building was at its maximum, and whether or not retrofit dryers should have been fitted into the airlock. So a huge range of issues in a very challenging and complex M&E environment. That was certainly probably the most technically difficult M&E related issue that I've come across in recent practice, and its interaction with other technical expert disciplines that we also had on board.
Mark, can you beat that one?
Those type of projects are technically demanding. I would say probably the most obscure one I've worked with. I worked on a job once where there was a newt expert, and there was a number of planning requirements, and we had to work out whether or not that they were greater crested or not, and whether they've been treated properly. No, but my personal favourite was a guy who was an expert on whether bats had been treated properly. The amount, the fines that you get for dealing with species like that on developments can be significant. And I had a great email once from a client asking me to attend site on Friday to meet with the Batman. So those were quite enjoyable things, and those people were absolutely experts in their field. I don't think you'd want to put them near a witness box, to be quite honest. Real characters, but definitely experts in very narrow fields.
Interesting. And then David, when you do appoint an expert and you go to an expert firm and you've got they tick your boxes, how do you verify them? How do you make sure that they have the skills and experience that they claim to, or that you need them to have?
Well, when I'm looking to appoint an expert, there are 4 categories that I'm looking to make sure they tick the boxes on. First, and obviously, their expertise. Second, their ability to write clear, concise, independent expert reports. Independence, and their approach to the giving of evidence of fact. And making sure that they don't have any professional or financial interest in the outcome, or have any interest in any third party that might benefit from the outcome of the litigation. And then fourthly, the giving of evidence. And if it's an expert that we've not worked with before, then I'll take recommendations, source recommendations from other possible experts, other lawyers, barristers, other third parties, and on the bigger cases, certainly we will conduct a panel interview of potential experts to talk to them in strict confidence about the case, the issues faced, how might they approach those issues on a technical basis, or quantum or delay, whatever it may be. Approach the giving of evidence, and then we'll make a decision based on those interviews and the insights they've been able to give. Something that's become more challenging, certainly in the UK domestic market recently, is the predominance of adjudication, where adjudication as a dispute resolution process and methodology. You often get expert reports served as part of parties' cases, but without the experts themselves needing to give evidence in person on those reports, and therefore have opportunity to be cross-examined on them. And so we are seeing, and I've seen as a trend, certainly fewer experts having detailed, lengthy experience of giving evidence in court on many important issues, if they have been predominantly giving evidence in the context of adjudication proceedings. Now, that's not the case when we're dealing with international disputes or arbitration, but it's certainly something to bear in mind when one's looking to appoint an expert.
We're going to move on to Q&A now, and actually we've got a question coming that's on a similar field. Anyone who has a question to our attendees, do put it in the chat box. So this question sort of says, I'll throw it to you, Mark, and it is about that kind of non-testifying upcoming experts who need to progress their careers situation. What do you do do you think you can be an expert without having the testifying experience? Or
I think it's a chicken and egg thing. You know, it's much easier to get expert appointments if you've done one and you've testified, and particularly if it's been in a published case. That's undoubtedly it. And the big question is how you bring that about. We have a development group with about 20 people in it who are going through a process to get through, you know, to develop their career as experts. What you sometimes have to do, you put them alongside testifying experts, so the lawyers get to know them and get to build some faith and some confidence in them. And every now and then a fairly modest sized project comes along, and you can put that person in. One of my assistants has now got his own appointment on a job, And the lawyer concerned simply called me and said, listen, we don't want to pay the top rate. It's disproportionate. What options have you got? And I've said, well, Mark, he's a great guy. He's £100 an hour less, and I will sit in the background and help with any queries and questions that come along. And he's had all the cross-exam training. So I think we've managed to, over the last 5 years, to bring on about 10 people that way. But it's really difficult because the number of things that settle, or as David has just said, go through adjudication, I think it probably takes 3 or 4 years usually for us to get us through the process. So to generate someone into the sort of fledgling expert career, 4 to 5 years from already being having a background in consultancy needs to be the expectation, because there just aren't enough opportunities to do it any quicker.
And that brings us nicely to a question that we had sent in advance. David, I'll ask this to you. There are a number of training providers out there that deliver expert witness training in topics such as law and procedure and stuff. Does this add to an expert's credibility in your view?
Well, I said earlier in answer to your previous question, Annie, the importance of expert witnesses being trained in preparation for giving of evidence, so that they fully understand the processes and procedures and don't come unstuck as a result of lack of knowledge. And so that preparation training is a very important part of an expert witness credibility. But in terms of technical credibility, no amount of preparation of that sort of training will enhance technical credibility. That is obviously down to expertise and their ability to write independent, objective, and impartial reports and give evidence accordingly, as well as, of course, being independent of the parties. So, training can certainly help, but it won't enhance the fundamental credibility that we're looking for, I would say.
Mark, have you found the training has prepared you better for giving evidence? Or?
I think it would be absolutely wrong for someone to take a technical expert or any discipline of experts and then have no training before going into a courtroom. They need to understand the process, who the people are, what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. Even simple things like how do you refer to the judge or the tribunal. These people need to know this stuff. So I think there's absolutely an essential role for it. But equally, as I think David's just alluded to, it doesn't make you an expert. It's 20, 30 years worth of experience that makes you an expert. And this is perhaps, I guess it's probably a really bad analogy would be to say it's a bit like teaching someone the highway code. It doesn't mean that they can drive. Yeah. You need both to be able to safely go out and join the motorway.
Okay. David, a question's come in from you on when you require a team of experts. So I'm guessing, should you need delay, quantum and technical all in one problem, do you have a preference as to whether you appoint various individuals or do you like to get a complete team from one consultancy?
Well, that's a very good question, and it depends on who those individuals or consultancy might be. Certainly, it's the case in the past that where we've needed a team, we have gone to one consultancy because that was part and parcel of our ensuring that we kept admin and costs and the efficient management and administration of the case was enhanced through the appointment of the one consultancy. But that was not the driver. The driver was to ensure that the individual experts that we were working with had the requisite expertise and competence. And having been satisfied of that, we were then reassured in moving forward to appoint the one consultancy practice where they all happened to work. And that certainly enhanced the information flow between experts and the joined up preparation of their respective reports to ensure consistency between those reports so far as was possible. But that was one or two cases. Certainly on others I can recall, we've appointed experts from different practices where it's not been possible or appropriate to get people with the necessary requisite expertise from within the one consultancy. So it depends on available resource and expertise first and foremost, and where that can be found.
Okay, thanks, David. And apologies there for the sirens. I live next door to the fire station, so when they go off, it can be quite loud in here. Mark, coming to you. What are the most common expert witness situations that you see in the UK market? Are they construction? Are they M&E?
I think probably the current stream of inquiries that come to us are perhaps split into 3 equal thirds. Quantum, delay, and technical overall. There is a really big demand for good technical experts, and being able to put a team together sometimes if something has to be done very, very quickly. I think, following on from what David was saying, is something that's been helpful and a big advantage. I don't think we should forget though that the UK is kind of a centre of excellence for expertise. And a lot of the experts that are based in the UK work in the Middle East and in Asia Pacific as well. So we're an exporter of consultancy talent, really. So that's that global experience, I think, is a really good thing, because it gives people a more rounded view of what happens, and how things are dealt with in different places. So I think the market can provide some real mixed bag. Apart from the oddball inquiries that you touched on earlier, there's a very consistent flow of work. However, it does come from different parts of the world in peaks and troughs. And I think one of the nice things about doing expert work is you actually never know what the next inquiry is going to be. There's going to be a phone call. Somebody's going to want something usually very quickly. They want to do a quick interview process, and you're going to meet a whole team of new people. And I think it's quite an exciting and interesting career path to follow from that point of view. If you like working on challenging things and meeting new people and getting to work on all kinds of things all over the world. So I don't think you can pigeonhole it to say these are the primary opportunities that come through at the moment, because the market constantly fluctuates, which is both a business challenge and a professional opportunity.
A question perhaps for you, David. Who is liable if an expert gets their opinion wrong? Is it the firm that employs them, or would it be the expert personally?
That all depends on the terms and conditions of appointment of the consultant that we've engaged. Ordinarily, it would be the firm that employs them. If the experts fail to meet the requisite standard of care in the provision of his or her opinion. The other point, though, I would say in terms of getting things wrong, looking at that more widely, there was a very timely reminder this week of the consequences of an expert failing to disclose and continuing to act in circumstances where that expert had a clear conflict of interest. There was a reported case, Essex County Council and UBB Waste Essex Limited number 3, where the expert engaged, his business had given pre-contract and design advice to UBB, but then he saw fit to accept an expert instruction in offering expert evidence on the design strategy that his business had devised for the operation and maintenance of the waste treatment plant. A clear conflict of interest, and the court in those circumstances found that his client was responsible for paying the other side's, the council's indemnity costs in respect to the technical evidence and the legal costs incurred in consequence. So that's a very timely reminder of the consequence of getting these issues wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a shocking one. We've got time for a couple more questions. We've got one here that's quite an interesting one. Mark, when you talk about the Batman, when you have an expert who's so clearly specialised in their one topic, and like you say, you might not think they will do quite well in the witness box, but it does go to tribunal and requires testimony. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think that's probably, it's usually a matter for the lawyers, but I would suggest that you might initially just get a report from that person that isn't a Part 35 report, but is a technical report on this very narrow issue. And if that isn't enough and you then want them to give evidence and it becomes critical, I think you've got to pack them off to Bond Solon or somewhere and get them on a crash course as to what it means to be an expert, and hope that they aren't terribly put off during that process. But, you know, look, as long as these people really are experts and do know something about their topic, and as long as they're honest and understand their duty to the court and answer the questions openly, have they really got anything to fear or hide? You know, they're there to help the court or the tribunal make the right decision. So Batman did really well, by the way.
I'm glad to hear it. And I think final question, David, is there a better time to get an expert involved? Do you like to bring them on early as possible, or does it depend on the matter?
It depends, Annie, on the matter, but if there are clear technical issues, or quantum or delay analysis issues around which the case will revolve, it's far better that we have early input from an expert so that we understand, together with the client, the respective strengths and weaknesses of the case, and then can take a decision based on that as to how to progress the case, what the strategy should be, whether to seek early negotiations. You need to know with as much certainty as possible what the client's best interests, how they are best served, whether in progressing a dispute through to formal dispute resolution or to seeking some sort of amicable compromise, and the strength or weakness of the independent expert case, be it technical or otherwise, is a very important central factor to that analysis and understanding what the cost-risk balance, where the cost-risk balance lies.
Thanks, David. I think that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you all for your questions and for joining us. Thank you very much, Mark and David, for joining us. If anyone wants to watch this again, it will be up on the website and we'll be sharing out the details if you want to share it with anyone who you think shouldn't have missed it. As we said before, the next episode is on the 30th of September and we'll be looking at insolvency. The link is further up in the chat, and again we'll be sending out a link probably tomorrow or the next day for you to register. Oh, there we go, Natalie's stuck it in there for you now, if you want to register for next week, and not next week, the week after. So thank you once again for joining us. It's been great to have you here, and see you all next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.